Welcome to Faith and Public Life's online Women of Faith Power Summit series. Today's dialogue is Revolutionary Love, how Sikh women are using service and activism to change the world. Together, our speakers today and all of you who are tuning in are part of a movement to lift up the moral voices of women of faith in the 2020 election. Together, we will make this nation a place that welcomes all, values the dignity of all, and provides a safe and healthy community for all. This dialogue is organized by Faith and Public Life as part of our Women of Faith 2020 campaign. Faith in Public Life is a nationwide network of 50,000 faith leaders united for justice. We're led by bold women of faith, with clergy and lay people, and we're bringing to bear our values of human dignity, equality, and justice into an election where all of these are under assault. Before we begin today's panel, I want to start with a moment of silence and a prayer for all of those taken too soon from this world in a tumultuous year. From COVID-19 to the white supremacist violence that killed 2 people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, we are all burdened by grief. A moment of silence. In the name of the divine within us and around us, let us pray. Let us pray for justice and love, resilience and mercy. May we receive it and may we give it. As leaders, as neighbors, and as a nation. May we be bearers of light that conquers the darkness of fear, the fear of scarcity, the fear of loss, the fear of the other. May we be tellers of truth, truth that calls us to action for justice, truth that tears down unholy man-made walls. May we be builders of a liberated community, a community in which there are no least and no last, no oppressor and no oppressed, where all are respected, protected, and whole. In the name of the divine within us and around us, amen. We're here today because the 2020 election is a moral crossroads for our nation. Sikh women are leaders of the journey to justice and the equality for every person. I've seen your leadership with my own eyes as we work as a multi-faith community against cruel and racist rhetoric and policies. In addition to our fantastic panel moderated by Mita Kaur, please be sure to stay for this evening's keynote address by my friend Valarie Kaur, the founder of the Revolutionary Love Project and author, See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. I'm here to listen and learn tonight. Thank you all for being here as well. Mita, welcome and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Mita Kaur, and I will be moderating this panel for this evening, and also joining the conversation where I can. It's a wonderful moment celebrating Sikh women coming together for this panel, and also celebrating Valarie Kaur's book, See No Stranger. I think it's wonderful that we can bring all these spiritual tools into the public space, into the common area where we can share and be generous with one another. A little bit about me. So I am a writer, I am a storyteller, and a community advocate. And I am the creator and editor of Her Name is Kaur, Sikh American Women, write about love, courage, and faith. It's a collection of stories. I just have it right here. I'll just put it up for you. And this project came to be, I was thinking about it this afternoon, what motivated this project for me. And the origin story for this project started with my maternal grandmother, my Naniji. And she was a trailblazer for me. So I'll briefly tell you about her. My mother was her 5th child. And my grandmother was located in northern India after the partition. She had migrated out of what is now Pakistan into Chandigarh, which is in Punjab. And by the time she got to my mother and raising my mother, she was having a spiritual awakening. And her interests and her motivation lied with her local Gurdwara, her local Sikh temple. She had an awakening. She wanted to be involved. She wanted to explore her leadership spiritually. So she asked my grandfather, my Nanaji, to take care of my mother, to raise my mother when she was just a little baby. And he said yes, and he did it seamlessly. And my grandmother got to go to the Gurdwara, shape it through her leadership around scholars coming to visit, talking about the revival of Sikhism. She organized daily lunches. She organized the musicians, the spiritual musicians that came to the Gurdwara. She really took a leadership position in her temple. And while she was doing that, my grandfather was dissecting frogs with my mother. He was reading Shakespeare to her. He was preparing her for the world. And what I find so amazing about them as a Sikh couple is that they blurred the lines on who was a caretaker in the family. Everyone was the caretaker. Everyone was taking care of my mom when my grandmother was full with in terms of her curiosity and discussions, the discussions she was having at the temple, learning more about the history, performing acts of service, which is known as seva or good deeds. Once she was full, she would go home and she would mother my mother. And it amazes me that they blurred the lines. Everyone was a caretaker. Everyone was pitching in. Everyone was taking on the household. So that duality of mothers do this and fathers do this, it disappeared. And everyone became a spiritual seeker, and everyone was pursuing their passion, which, and then I, growing up, I was looking for those stories. I was looking for my grandmother's stories. I was looking for my mother's stories, and I did not see them. I did not see them in print in college or in graduate school in California. And I wanted to hear more voices. I wanted to explore those emotional maps, because while I love my grandmother's story and my mother too is a leader in her own right, I wanted to hear more to understand how Sikh women were living and leading and participating in this American life. And so that led me to the book, and I put a call out for Sikh American women to explore their greatest love story. And that greatest love story expanded out to more than just romantic love. It was about spiritual love, family love, the love we have for social justice out in the world, the love we have for humanity. And the name Kaur, which is in the title, her name is Kaur. The name Kaur, which is given to Sikh women, it holds a very powerful place for those who take it on. I can speak for myself in terms of why I took it on, and I can suggest as to why other Sikh women take it on. And maybe we can talk more to the panelists about that too. There's a real, our last teacher, spiritual teacher, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, wanted to reinforce gender equality for his Sikhs. And so he gave Sikh women the name Kaur, and he gave Sikh men the name Singh. Now, Kaur is, you can think of it as spiritual princess or warrior princess, but in its essence, I think it's about autonomy and sovereignty, and it's giving Sikh women full decision making in their lives, what they're in charge of, the duties they take on, the responsibilities they take on, their choices. They are in charge. And when you think about how awesome that power is to be in charge of your destiny, I think we just stand up a little straighter and start to take it more seriously. that is the origin of the name. And I think I see a lot of women today taking it on. And I think it's about, I think it's really critical in this time, in this convergence where we're at in our political and social life in the US, that we do rise to the power of our name. And we're going to talk about that more with the panelists as well. And with that, I'm going to just set us up. Before I introduce our panelists, I wanted to set up the context by which we're going to have this conversation. This conversation is very much influenced by our first spiritual teacher, Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And he laid out the blueprint for Sikhism. He laid out our value system, and he wanted to make sure that we followed a path that was paved in love and humility and truth and injustice. And for a Sikh, the goal of the Sikh life is to find liberation. And we will not find liberation sitting at home doing nothing. We are going to find our liberation with our brothers and sisters out in the field, in the open battlefield for social justice. And that will be our focus tonight for the panel. And I'm very happy you're here to join us. So we're gonna just waiting for the panelists to come on, and then I'll go ahead and introduce them. Hey, Jasper.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Hello.
Hey, Sachi. Okay, so, Sachi, I think you're muted.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you.
Hello.
So we have a power panel, and I'm gonna go. Which way do I go? I'm gonna go with Jasper, Joe, and Seki. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce these women. We have Jasper Gore out of Chicago. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Jasper Gore is the co-founder of the Sikh Healing Collective, a mental health relief effort that was created to meet the immediate needs of the Sikh community in response to the domestic terror that took place at the Sikh temple shooting in Oak Creek. Jasper is a clinical pharmacist, and she has participated in disaster relief efforts, as well as serving as a counselor for Sikh camps and retreats around the world, teaching children. Her passion is to empower and teach children and young adults to be comfortable in their own skin, to embrace differences, and build bridges through compassion. And when I was going through these bios, you're going to see a lot of connection and crossover amongst these three women. And I thought that was pretty amazing to see. So when we go to Joe, Joe Gore is a passionate advocate for universal equality and social justice. She also is a lover of national parks and solo world travel. Currently, she works as Senior Policy Counsel at the New York City Commission on Human Rights, where she was the primary drafter of the agency's seminal guidance on anti-Black racial discrimination based on hair. Joe worked also as the senior staff attorney at the Sikh Coalition, litigating a docket of high-impact religious rights cases. Joe also worked closely with the victims and survivors of the Oak Creek mass shooting and represented the first Sikh Americans to testify before the U.S. Senate in a hearing on hate crimes and domestic extremism. Joe has published numerous op-eds and think pieces on civil rights and struggles of modern-day America. And then finally, we have Sachiko Gore. Sachiko Gore in 2018 became the Sikh Coalition Executive Director. In this role, she manages the day-to-day operations, staff, and strategic direction of the largest Sikh civil rights organization in the United States. Sachi spent 8 years working for the Sikh Coalition, in every core facet of the organization's work. So we can see why she's both. executive director now. She knows every nook and cranny, which I think is amazing training, and that she had the courage to just take that on. She launched Sikh Coalition social media platforms, and she also served as the Senior Director of Development and Finance, where she refined organizational branding. She's also helped manage the multi-month national she managed the multi-month national response to the Oak Creek tragedy in 2012. So Jasper, Joe, and Sochi, all in their own way, were working very hard in their own capacity to respond to that crisis. And I love that. I mean, it's the generosity in the air is just rising when you see how much work these women are doing. Sachi is fluent in Punjabi. She was born and raised in Jersey and is a graduate of New York University with degrees in religious studies and psychology. She also serves as the New York Community Trust Leader Fellow. Do you women take a break?
No.
No? Okay. Well, okay. So let's go ahead and begin. I want to start with, well, let me just orient you. Could you hear me okay. So just to restate, Guru Nanak states, we find liberation as Sikhs. We find our freedom as Sikhs. We attain it in the world itself. We're not going to do it sitting at home, knitting or watching Netflix. We're going to do it out in the world, in battle for social justice, out in that open field where everything is taking place. And it seems that 2020 is the year, an example where everything is taking place all at once. So I'm going to start with Jasper. And the first question is, what Sikh values call you to social justice? And can you give an example? And before you answer that question, Jasper, we just want to know your current focus, your current passion in your work right now. And then we'll go to Joe and then Sochi.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. This is wonderful. So my name is Jasper Gore. Like she said, I'm from Chicago. Outside of my professional, I do a lot of community work. Seva is what we call it, so selfless service, which is anywhere from disaster relief to local community work and interfaith. So those take up a lot of my time. So in our faith, like other faiths, it says give 10% of your earnings, but we believe in giving at least 10% of our time to the community as well. So it's really important to have dialogue and to have understanding amongst one another. So therefore, interfaith is very important to me. And to your question, value that drives me, I believe equality is at the fiber of the Sikh faith, and it calls to social justice, to stand up for our rights and for the rights of others. There's a concept called Sarbat Dapala, which means well-being for all, prosperity for all. And in that, meaning I might be privileged, I might be okay, but if my neighbors or anybody else around me does not have the rights, does not have rights that I have, that I need to make sure I'm helping them as well. So I'm not to sit back and disengage. And so the example I can give is the founder. There's so many, of course, but we'll start out with our founder of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And so he was not only a spiritual enlightener, but he was an activist. He challenged the oppressive political system of the time, and he even went to jail for it. And there are many other examples of freedoms and freedom fighters for other people's freedoms as well as ourselves. And then he left us with institutions that are still powerful today, as in, if you go to a Gurudwara, you'll find Langar. Langar is not only a community kitchen, so when you go to a Gurudwara where Sikhs gather to congregate, you will find that there is food, and there's a place for feeding your body as well as your soul. But you will see social discrimination addressed just by us sitting together, right? No matter if you are the president or if you are a janitor, you're going to be sitting on the same platform so that you are knocking down the barriers and building bridges for social status and justice.
Great, thank you, Jasper. Yeah, Longer is great, and it's great, and yeah, I really love that breaking bread together was the way we were going to figure out that the light in the person next to me and the light in the person in front of me or behind me, it's all the same light. So thank you for mentioning that. Joe, can you just give us, let us know where you're at with your work, and then what Sikh values call you to social justice, and can you give an example?
Sure. Thank you for having me tonight. It's an honor to be here among these wonderful women. You know, this is a difficult question to think about because there's so many, you know, Jasper touched on a lot of the points that I think really resonate within all of our hearts. I mean, I hear so often that we all recognize that Sikhi promotes the values of equality, of social justice, of fighting oppression, but what does that mean in practice? Mm-hmm. So part of my work is thinking through, I mean, especially in this tumultuous administration that we're currently in, what does it mean to fight for other communities? So, for example, supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, what does that mean for Sikhs? You know, how do we relate the struggles that Sikhs faced in Punjab with police brutality to the struggles that the Black community faces here? And how do we draw those connections? So I'm focusing a lot on education work in a sort of a public space at the moment. And in my actual day-to-day job, I work as an anti-discrimination attorney for an agency that you mentioned, the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And part of what fascinates me as a civil rights attorney is that long before Western anti-discrimination laws were written, so long before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, over 500 years ago, you know, the Sikhi prescribed equality, firm equality for all people. And that's really revolutionary when you think about it. You know, Meeta, you said Sikhi lays out a blueprint for social justice. I'm paraphrasing you, but something of that sort. Mm-hmm. And it's true. And so we have sort of all the lessons here before us, and how do we follow it? And one of the stories that really resonates with me is this sort of fighting. It's easy to fight for your own community in many ways, but how do we fight for other communities? So like, for example, the concept of Sarbat Tapala, the betterment of all. Guru Har Gobind, the sixth Sikh Guru, he was locked up as a political prisoner by the emperor, the Mughal emperor at the time. And he was eventually given his freedom, but he didn't want just to be given his freedom. He wanted the 52 Hindu kings who were imprisoned with him to also have their freedom. And so the emperor said, okay, well, I'll give them their freedom, but only whoever can, you know, hold on to your cloak when they leave the prison. And so he was able to get a cloak designed that had 52 tassels. So all of the prisoners were able to hold on to his cloak and walk out of prison with him. And this is an observance that we call Bandi Chor Divas, which we celebrate around Diwali. And so this sort of concept of, listen, when I'm free, it doesn't matter. Nobody's free until everybody's free. And so practicing that in day-to-day life, when we stand up for movements that problems that maybe we don't necessarily face within our own community, but that do affect us and affect other people, I think that's what really drives me to this work.
Thank you. I love that story, and kids in multi-diverse classrooms and racially diverse classrooms also get very excited about that story because it's leaving no one out. And I think that's the point you're trying to make. We're not going to leave anyone out. And I also love that you're continuing education and you're finding the intersections between what happened in India and what's happened in the US and the history that we've lived with in the US. So thank you for those points. Sachi, your current work and what Sikh values call you to social justice.
Mita, thanks for the wonderful introduction, and to Faith in Public Life for organizing this, and to Sphere, Joe, it's great to see you both again and meet you. So, and thank you for having me. I think this, the question of like what calls you to do social justice work, it's in Sachiko, I think the way that Jasper and Joe have framed it, right? There's just so many concepts and all of them are so intertwined and feed into each other. And for me, I think where I would start, or where I've always started, is with Mool Mantar. Even thinking about like what I'm teaching my daughter right now. And what I've learned is we start with this concept of just one. Everything comes from one spirit, one being, one God, Waheguru. And from that, we get this concept of equality. Because if we all come from one, who are we to judge who is good or bad? Who are we to think about who is different from us and how we categorize differences? And then you go to, you know, there's several different lines in the Mool Mantar. It's the very beginning of our scriptures. It's the very beginning of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And you get into a couple of other lines, and there is this the concept of truth and integrity, and then there's this concept of the creator, and the way that my dad always described it was, it's very, like, he does it very beautifully, but like when you have a creator, you can't call any of the creator's creations wrong or incorrect. And so for me to really not think about things and have that humility to not judge others. And then when we're thinking about concepts that are very much needed in social justice work, which is like the fuel of Nirpo and Nirvair, which means without fear and without hate. And these concepts of like, how do you actually feel yourself to do this work, right? It's the concept of equality, like Jasper brought up. It's the concept of recognizing really the betterment of all, like Joe brought up, but then also understanding that like you have to move forward in life without fear and without hate. And the Mool Mantar goes on, but like some of these core concepts I think are just very much at the core of Sikhi. And when we start really understanding the basics, every historical moment, and there's so many historical moments, every lesson, every Gurbani's dukh, or like lines from scripture, will, I think, get back to some of these core principles in different ways. It's like the thesis, like that's how I've always thought about it. It's the thesis of Sikhi. And so, yeah, for me, when I think about the Sikh Coalition's work, and I think about, you know, protecting not just Sikh rights, but doing it in such a way that we're improving the rights for everyone. How do you do that, and how do you keep fueling yourself? And I think you just have to find what drives you. And for me, those are some of the core concepts of Sikhi that continue to drive me.
Thank you, Sachi. Thank you. Yeah, you know, what comes to mind is Guru Nanak Dev Ji's saying around what is higher than truth is truthful living. So as we discuss these values and these moments and these concepts in Sikhism, I found that like, at least in my spiritual journey, I find myself getting much quieter, just much quieter, so I can really absorb the learning or live the learning. And it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task to stop yourself from habits that we've created in the mind, like judgment, or like me, you know, it's all about me. So that shift, that spiritual shift, becomes very important, I think, when we are engaging in community work and social justice work. So thank you for all of those amazing points. Let's see, we're going to move on to the next question. Okay. You know what? Okay, we're going to go to number 3. How do you overcome tension or resistance, gender stereotyping, or limits placed on you with family or in other spaces you enter to pursue social justice? How do you draw upon, what do you draw upon to find your center and meet your goals? Jasper?
Great question. So as for family, I'm pretty blessed to have a very supportive family. When I was in my 20s, when I wanted to go out in the world and serve, and being a young female, my parents didn't stop me. They cautiously, didn't want me to, but still I can convince them. And so they're fine. They're very supportive and help me fundraise, help me do all types of things. My dad was an activist himself when he was in India. So, and, to the point where he would go to protests, and my mom, would be okay with it and allowed him, even though he would possibly leave behind 3 little kids, and for her to be a single mom. And outside of the family, that's another story. So what I draw upon, a lot of the places I go to, like Joe, I'm a world traveler as well, and go to places where we have to do medical work and other work, male-dominated society more than America here. So, you have to push your way through to make sure people hear you as a woman, and make sure you get your mission accomplished no matter what it takes. The strength that I draw on is my history. We have a long legacy, even though we're a young faith, a long legacy of men and women who have protested, who have resisted, who have showed courage and conviction and unwavering strength and faith. So I find it so remarkable to look back on their what they've gone through when the history was a lot worse than what it is today for us. And so I find that we women have to take a seat at the table and become decision makers, and that's the only way we're going to make change. So I find a way to come to the table and make sure that we're heard.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, and it makes me think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who says, if you can't find a seat at the table, make your own table. Yeah. So, Joe, how do you overcome that tension and resistance when you enter into spaces?
Within my own family, I've been very blessed. I have had parents who've never said no to whatever career I desired or my social justice work. They've been completely supportive. I mean, there's the usual in the beginning, like, why don't you become a doctor? Okay, you don't want to do that. That's fine. Like, what are you doing? So they've been very supportive, and they pattern to me like what it means to be a strong woman, and a strong just social justice warrior. I see it in my own family. And so I've been really lucky to have that. But I do think, one of the most interesting challenges, of course, I face the challenges of being a woman of color attorney in the United States. And even in social justice institutions and movement spaces, we know that white supremacy is a prevalent force, and it can dictate sort of how we are responded to. But what I really find interesting is when I sort of push for Sikh-based perspective. So, for example, restorative justice is a huge component of Sikh. Like, we believe in sort of rehabilitation. We believe in second chances. We believe in seeing our enemy as our brother, or see no stranger, as Valarie's book is called. So all of those concepts, however, are not always warmly responded to. So, for example, if we see somebody who may have discriminated against someone, but they maybe want to try and be better. I understand there is a call for accountability. People are upset. But when I push for, okay, well, maybe we can try to see if this person can respond to education or working with our community. We did that a lot at the Sikh Coalition, which Sachiko will remember, is that we had victims of hate crimes who often pushed for it. They said, we want the person who committed X hate crime to do community service with the Sikh Coalition or with Sikh communities. And that was always so transformative. And so, getting people to really understand that we don't always have to throw people away. If people make mistakes, even if there are people that repeatedly make mistakes, we can't just keep throwing people away. At some point, we have to see if we can try to educate. We can try to get people to, I know this country is so divisive right now. I know that it's hard to talk to people. I know that facts are sort of, we don't even know what's the truth anymore in some ways, because we're getting such different news from different outlets. And that happens to our own community. You know, we see the uncles and aunties on Facebook and WhatsApp, and they're listening to all these sort of this propaganda, and it's sort of everyone is divided into their camps firmly. And, you know, just finding ways to cross that bridge, and really sort of bring people together who have, like I said, not always have hurt our communities, I think is an important perspective that we need to continue to push. And I've faced a lot of resistance with that. So I think just giving examples of where it has worked successfully in the past is something that I've tried to do to overcome it. Like, look, I know this isn't something you're comfortable with, but see how it's worked in this context. See how this person has changed. We can't change everybody, and not everyone's gonna come out and say, you know what, I'm no longer racist. I'm no longer prejudiced. I love everyone now. Of course not. That's not the reality. But there is a way to make people feel an emotional connection, to humanize people that they previously didn't. And I think that's important that we continue to push for that, even though there is a lot of resistance in the movement space for that kind of revolutionary love.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I love that you want to replace a broken lens on people with a very compassionate lens, and offer that generosity and let them find that light within them. And you're aiding that process, which is amazing. It's completely in alignment with Sachiko. So thank you, Sachi. How do you overcome resistance?
So I think similar to Jasper and Joe, I am very lucky to have a supportive family and a supportive partner. And I think all of those things make it easier in the tug of war that is everyone's life, right? We all are juggling multiple responsibilities, multiple roles. And when you have a supportive family, supportive partner, when you feel grounded in those relationships, I think it makes it easier to juggle those multiple roles. So I think in that way, I'm definitely blessed. And I think when we're talking about community and having strength in community, a bit of what Joe is saying is like, it's really important. It's like, where are we grounding ourselves? What concepts, what ideals, what values are we grounding ourselves as in a community? And I think for me, a lot of the friction that does come in doing this work comes from places of when we're allowing anger, when we're allowing egos, when we're allowing possessiveness, again, lack of humility, like all of that comes through. And when that stuff starts seeping through, it makes it much harder to collectively work. Mm-hmm. And so I find, whether it's in the Punjabi Sikh community or not, right? Which table you're sitting at, as a woman of color, like pushing your way through, and being young, right? Like all of these things often work against, I'll say me, but I'm sure others as well. And so it's about, again, having strength. And for me, what I've grounded myself is, you know, there's cultural realities. But when it comes to Sikhi, and when it comes to like, where am I finding my strength? I come from a lineage of women. I come from a lineage of Kaurs who have always done what's right, who have found ways to make sure that they're a seat at the table, whether they're remembered or not. And I think even in Sikhi, right, like we all come from very patriarchal societies. And so some of those gender lenses still very much exist, even though Sikhi absolutely says we're all equal. Some of those stereotypes still very much exist. So there was this incredible Kaur, Mai Bago, and she led an army of men who were about to desert, fixed them right up, and didn't send them back. She led the way back to battle. And so I have to remember, I have that strength, whether or not I will be acknowledged for it or remembered for it or thought of an equal for it. And so even though many people remember my Bago story, when we do our daily prayers, we remember those men that deserted and came back, but we don't actually remember my Bago even in our prayers. So like just for me, it's like, again, that's not what I want to concentrate on. I need to concentrate on getting the job done. And that's what my Pago did. And when I think about all of the other women, my mother included, and if we think into our entire into our families, if we ask the women, if we start talking to our aunties and we start talking to all of them, they fought lots of battles, many of them that we don't even know about. And so once you start asking those questions, once you even start asking men battles that their sisters, mothers have fought, then they start recognizing, no, it's not that they weren't fighting them. It's that we just never remembered them for those. And I think that has started, one, grounding me in reality and helping me remember why I do what I do, and reminding myself that I need to have humility in my work. But also reminding it served as a tool to start weaving my way to the tables that I know I belong at.
Thank you, Sachi. Amazing points. Amazing points, all of you. I just want to pause and acknowledge how much I think is working against women in general in patriarchal societies and frameworks. There is a lot stacked up. And yet we do say the same level of resistance in breaking down those structures. So there is a very nice counterbalance to what is stacked up in keeping us away from those decision-making tables. And I think Sachi went ahead and said this, when we can recenter in places that energize us, this term was coined in Silicon Valley, but when we can be a disruptive truth teller and we find the truth in our mind and we speak it and it comes out of our mouth and everyone can hear it, I think that's how we get to the next step. And sometimes it's really easy to do that, and sometimes it's very hard. And what I love, and I see all three of you doing this, and it's a wonderful reminder, you know, when we can lean on our history and go back and be with our history and be with our activists and our gurus and everyone who fought very hard for us to be here today, I think there is a re-energizing that starts to happen in our bodies. It starts to wake us up to who we are again. And I can't say enough about that. It's really so critical to wake up and remember who we are and where we come from in every moment possible. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get to this last question. We have about 2 minutes, so we have to make this fairly quick. You guys are doing amazing. I love listening to you. Okay, Jasper, in your opinion, given the convergence of issues we are dealing with as a country, what is the most important change you want to see in new policies? And what factors are driving your decisions for voting in the presidential election, Congress and Senate, state and local races?
Make it quick. I think racial and ethnic inequality is really important and something that's not been addressed for a while, and therefore we have so much tension building up, and that dialogue is so important in order for us to make sure that we get past this. Also mental health and taking access to healthcare. I think it's all about, we're not taking care of our people, and once you take care of the people and other things that people worry about, like economy and other things, those happen. But we have to take care of each other, and that's what's important for me.
Thank you. Joe?
I think the exploitative nature of capitalism and rugged individualism, which drives our country's response to so many things, like, for instance, the current pandemic that we're facing, some of the mental health challenges that have come up, and also just continues to make the sort of exasperate the struggles of working class Americans. I think that's an issue that's particularly important to me. I mean, we see now what's happening with the pandemic. Folks are starving, people are homeless. Like, these are issues that really, you know, I think, yes, we have a we have a very problematic administration that we're facing at the moment, and some forces that we haven't faced in quite some time. But we're also dealing with the ongoing struggles that also impact the Sikh community. Again, we often talk a lot about people from more privileged backgrounds, but immigration, a lot of these issues, healthcare, these impact the Sikh community very, very much so, as well as other communities. So that's something that's of particular importance to me, and how I'll be voting or focusing my attentions this election.
Thank you.
100%, what Jasper and Joe said. I think it comes down to equity and having true justice for all. And so all of the issues that they named don't need to be renamed, but I'll take the liberty of just closing out. What I would say is, in Sikhi, there's an individual by Ganea who was giving water and food and medicine to the opposing force and to opposition. And they were the same people that would get up and start fighting again. And when he was confronted about why he was doing it, the 10th Guru, as Mita mentioned, actually gave him more medicine and more support and resources to continue what he was doing. Because what he had responded was, I don't see enemy. I see all my brothers, my sisters, my siblings. And so I think what I am taking into this election is, we need to fight for justice and equity. But we need to start finding ways to recognize that we are all in this together, whether we like the person sitting next to us or not. And so finding a way to really start breaking down the walls, not building them, breaking the walls down, and getting to a place where we are thinking about our future, but really our kids' future and generations to come. We are fighting for their lives, and that's what we have to go into this election with.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Can't say much. I mean, it's all so interconnected. When you can breathe and have food on your table and have a job to pay your bills, then mental health is in a good place. And those are basic human rights that every person deserves, whether they have the same political views as us or not. And those basic rights are, yes, very much worth fighting for. I don't know how much, okay, I'm gonna try to do a fire round. We're gonna do a fire round, okay? Very quickly, what gives you hope, Jasper?
Gives me hope. Meeting women like this and having seen what everyone else is doing, it drives me to do more and not to stop.
Thank you. Joe, what gives you hope?
The protest movements that we're seeing around the country. Hope is the only way to overcome the impossible challenges that we're facing now. Hope is all we have. It's the only way to drive forward.
Thank you. Sachi.
Kids give me a lot of hope. I think there's an innocence that kids have that we all need to remember and capture. So my nieces and nephews, my own child now, just 100%. We're doing it for them.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And they're kids. They're in a constant state of love and purity. They don't know anything else. So yes. Wow, thank you so much. I wish we could go on, but we also get to hear Valarie talk about her book. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing yourselves and your work. I hope we get to do this again.
Thank you, Mita.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Joe.
Vaiguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaiguru Ji Ki Fateh. The beloved community belongs to divine oneness, and so does all that it achieves. I am so honored to be here tonight with my Sikh sisters. I was backstage watching them speak, my heart just beaming. I've known each of them for a very long time, seen them in the struggle, seen them in the fire, seen them get up again and again, day after day, leading with their own kind of revolutionary love. Satyajit shared the story of Mai Pago, the first woman warrior in our Sikh faith. The story goes there were 40 soldiers who were abandoning their post during a great battle. And this village woman, Mai Pago, turned to them and said, "You will not abandon your post. You will return to the fire, and I will lead you." She donned a turban with a sword in her hand and fire in her eyes. She led them where no one else would. Back into the fire, she became the one she was waiting for. When I saw my sisters speak tonight, I thought, oh, they are our modern day Mai Pagos. They are the ones who are using their voice as their sword, their hands as their shield. They are showing up each day, whether through art or activism and healing, to fight the good fight, to inspire all of us who might want to give up. And they've done it for so many years. Meeta Kaur has done it with her storytelling and writing, lifting up the voices of Sikh women, expanding our imagination for what love and caregiving looks like in our community. Jasper has done the hard behind-the-scenes work of healing our community in the wake of atrocity, in the wake of massacre. And Satyajit, the executive director of the Sikh Coalition, the largest, strongest civil rights organization for the Sikh community on this soil. She's been leading the way through advocacy and community building with so much grace, and as a new mother. And Jo Kaur, my sister in the struggle, who I've seen in the trenches for so many years, leading as an attorney, as an advocate, as someone who has such a sharp and strong public voice. And now she herself as a new mother to an 8-month-old, showing him what it means to be a Sikh of Guru Nanak. Each of them inspire me, and I just want to thank Faith in Public Life for being able to draw us all together, for they show us what the meaning of Kaur is. Meeta named the definition of Kaur, spiritual princess. It's often translated as warrior princess. I think of it as sovereign woman warrior. A woman who has the ability to shape her own destiny and has a vision of leaving no one behind. Follow these women, support these women, fund these women, because for too long have Sikh women been invisible to mainstream America. And if we were invisible, if we were visible, it was as mothers or sisters or daughters of wives of slain men. Our men have only made the news when they are victims of hate crimes in this country. And so for too long, the only way America has ever known the Sikh community is through a narrative of victimhood. But we are changing that. Our generation is changing that. These women are changing that. We are showing America that what we have to tell you is not just that we have been on the front lines of hate crimes and hate violence since 9/11 and long before that. No, we are also showing you what it looks like to respond to that kind of hate, that kind of vitriol, that kind of cruelty with a revolutionary kind of love. A love that insists that our liberation is bound up to yours. A love that shows us standing side by side with our Black sisters and brothers and siblings proclaiming Black lives matter. A love that lifts up our Indigenous sisters and brothers, knowing that their history is the true starting point of the history in the Americas. And if we take their memory as the true starting point of the United States of America, we know that the white supremacy that we are seeing under this administration is not an aberration. It is a continuation. of the kind of white supremacist violence that helped found this country. And so we are building these bonds of solidarity as Sikh Americans, leading with Indigenous voices, centering Black lives, and lifting up women of color who know how to leave no one behind. You see, we as Sikhs, we fight for every single one of us. Nako beri, nahi begana. Nako beri, nahi begana. I see no stranger. I see no enemy. These were the words of Guru Nanak that my grandfather first taught me when I was a little girl growing up on the farmlands of California. My family had lived and farmed on that land for a century. So I felt deep roots in America, and yet through stories and scriptures and songs, I also felt deeply connected to my Sikh heritage. And the kind of revolutionary love that my grandfather gave me came primarily through our origin story, through the story of Guru Nanak. And you have heard him named throughout this evening, the founder of the Sikh faith. I want to offer you his story, the way that it came down to me, so that you can see the beating heart in each of the women you have just heard, what love really looks like. The source of it was him. This is from my book, See No Stranger, in chapter 1, the story of Nanak. 5 centuries ago, the story goes, halfway around the world in a village in Punjab on the Indian subcontinent, there lived a young man named Nanak. He was deeply troubled by the violence around him, Hindus and Muslims in endless turmoil. One day, he disappeared on the bank of a river for 3 days. People thought he was dead. People thought he was drowned. But Nanak emerged on the 3rd day with a vision of oneness. Ik Omkar, the oneness of humanity and the oneness of the world, the oneness that Satjit spoke of, the wellspring of our faith. This vision threw him into a state of ecstatic wonder, Vismad, and he began singing songs of devotion called Shabads, the songs that we sing to our babies today, praising the divine within him and all around him. In other words, he was in love. And love made him see with new eyes. You see, Guru Nanak could look upon the face of anyone or anything and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me I do not yet know. I see no stranger, said Guru Nanak. He taught that all of us could see the world in this way, that there is a voice inside of each of us called Home May, the I that names itself as separate from you. It resides in the bowl that holds our individual consciousness, but separateness is an illusion. When we quiet the chatter in our heads through music or meditation or recitation or song, the boundaries begin to disappear. The bowl breaks. For a moment, we taste the truth, sweet as nectar. We belong to one another. Joy rushes in. Long after the moment passes, we can choose to remember the truth. We can choose to see no stranger. If you want to play the game of love with me, step forth with your head on your palm, said Guru Nanak. You see, the path of love that Guru Nanak set out for us, it was a hard path. It was a dangerous path. Love is dangerous business, Papaji used to say, my grandfather. Love is dangerous business, for if I see you and I choose to love you as my sister or brother, then I must be willing to let your grief into my heart. And I must fight for you when you are in harm's way. And so Sikhs became known as Sant Sipahi, warrior sages or sage warriors. The warrior fights, the sage loves. It is a path of revolutionary love. I remember coming home from school after hearing my first racial slur on the playground. Get up, you black dog. was what the little boy had said. And I came to my grandfather's lap and I cried and I cried. And he looked at me and he told me the story of my pago, and he reminded me of our guru's call to love above all. And he said, my dear, don't abandon your post. Don't abandon your post. You are called to be Sant Sipahi, to fight for all of us, for yourself, without ever losing sight of the humanity of those whom you fight. Don't abandon your post. In all the years since, I feel like my entire life has been a struggle to keep my promise made to my grandfather of not to abandon my post. So in the aftermath of September 11th, when hate violence flooded city streets and so many of our community members were killed, Balbir Singh Sodhi, Balbir Uncle, a man I called Uncle, the first person killed in a hate crime after 9/11, I had to remember not to abandon my post, to pick up my camera as my sword, to get in my car and try to document the atrocities that were unfolding. That moment turned me into an activist. And in all the years since, it'll be 19 years on September 15th since his murder, and all the years since, laboring for social justice, for racial justice with Black and Brown communities through the atrocity, the massacre that was the Oak Creek shooting of 2012 that all of my sisters named. Through all of the years since, I believed that every lawsuit, with every film, with every campaign, we were making the nation safer for the next generation. Satyajit is a mother now. Jo is a mother now. I am a mother now. And behind closed doors, we are reckoning with the fact that we are raising our babies in a nation more dangerous for them. Little brown children with long hair, wearing patkas, wearing turbans one day, more dangerous for them than it was for us. How do we keep our post? When white supremacist violence floods our streets, when a virus kills disproportionately people of color, when my childhood mountains are on fire this moment because we have not done enough to change and fight for climate justice. How do we keep our post when we are in the final days to an election that is not about ideas on the left or right, but an election that is about democracy versus authoritarianism? How do we keep our post when it is so difficult for us to labor each day as individuals, keeping our children safe, our families safe, our households running? How do we still show up to continue this revolutionary moment with our Black sisters and brothers proclaiming that Black lives matter? How do we keep our post when we are fighting on so many different fronts? How do we summon the Maipago within us and continue to walk into the flames? In this book, I sit with white supremacists and police officers and soldiers and former abusers, and trying not to abandon my post, right? I see no enemy, trying to leave no one behind. And every time I sit and I listen to them, just yesterday, I was speaking on a video call with Frank Roque, the white supremacist who murdered Balbir Uncle 20 years ago, almost 19 years ago. He's in prison. And looking into his eyes and hearing him speak, I want to leave. I want to abandon my post. But I see no stranger. I see no enemy. And the longer I sat and I listened to him beneath the slogans and the sound bites, I could begin to hear his story. And I began to feel his pain. And I began to see his wound. You see, I have learned on this path of revolutionary love that our gurus have set us on, that there are no such thing as monsters in this world. There are only human beings who are wounded. people who do what they do out of their own sense of insecurity or greed or blindness. Their participation in oppression cuts them off from their own capacity to love. The white supremacist violence that we are seeing in this country right now, it is a symptom of unresolved grief. Too many people, too many disaffected white people grieving, needing to grieve the notion that this country ever belonged just to them in the first place. They're all still going to be there the day after the election. So as Joe said, what will we do with them? What does it mean to show up with this kind of radical revolutionary love for everyone? It means that all of us have a different role at different times. If you are someone who has a knee on their neck right now, like so many Black and brown people do, it is not necessarily your role to look up at your oppressor and try to love them, try to wonder about them, try to see them. No, your job is to stay alive. Your job is to take the next breath. Your job is to last. That is your act of revolutionary love. But if you are someone, by virtue of your white skin or the faith that you hold or whatever privilege that you wield, if you are someone who is safe enough or brave enough to wonder about those kinds of opponents, to sit with them, to listen to the white people who are clinging to a nation that sees us as enemies and strangers, then maybe it is your job to do what we cannot. Maybe you can sit with those kinds of opponents and help them weather this great transition we are in. Because this election is happening within a much broader transition on American soil. Within 25 years, the number of people of color in America will exceed the number of white people for the first time since colonization, and we are at a crossroads no matter who is in the White House. Will we? Will we continue to descend into a kind of civil war? A power struggle with those who want to return America to a past where a certain class of white people hold dominion? Or will we begin to birth a nation that has never been on the face of this planet? A nation made up of other nations, a nation that is truly multiracial, multi-faith, multicultural, multi-gendered, where power is shared, and a nation where we see no stranger. The midwife says to breathe and then to push. I see glimpses of that nation now. I see glimpses of the nation that is longing to be, especially when I look into the eyes of my Sikh sisters and watch them lead. Solidarity with Black and Indigenous and Latinx and queer lives, in solidarity together, is how we begin to live into that America that we dream. But we can't do it unless we are all ready to push. And in these final days up to an election that will determine the course of history, the future of democracy, and with climate change, the future of our earth, the future of humanity, it is time for each of us to push, to find our role in the moment, to push. So how? I leave you with this. My sisters talked about our ancestors. If there is such a thing as intergenerational trauma, and I feel it through my veins from partition to 84, I feel it in my body, that intergenerational trauma that our ancestors survived. But if there is such a thing as intergenerational trauma, then I believe there is also such a thing as intergenerational resilience and wisdom. Don't abandon your post. How? On one of my last visits to Oak Creek, Wisconsin, the site of the greatest act of mass violence on the Sikh community in the United States, there was a man, a grandfather who looked like my own, lying on a hospital bed. His name was Baba Punjab Singh. He was a man of great words, a great teacher. And all of that ended for him when a white supremacist opened fire inside of that Sikh Gurdwara in Wisconsin in 2012. And in every month and every year since then, Baba Punjab Singh laid on a hospital bed, unable to move or speak except to blink his eyes. Once for no, twice for yes. The last time I was with him, his son asked him, Papaji, father, are you in Chardi Kala? are you in Chaddi Kala? Chaddi Kala is the spirit in the Sikh faith of ever rising joy, even in suffering, ever rising spirits, even in the darkness. Papaji, are you in Chaddi Kala, this man who cannot move or cannot speak? Do you feel our ancestral spirit of ever rising joy in your body? And he would always blink his eyes twice. Yes, I am in Chaddi Kala. Baba Punjab Singh died right before this virus descended upon the country, and we weren't able to say goodbye. And I thought about him every day since, because if Baba Punjab Singh could spend 8 years in that condition in Chaddi Kala, in ever-rising joy, ever-rising high spirits, and so can I. And so can we. In the name of all that we have lost, in the name of Baba Punjab Singh and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all those we have lost at the hands of police violence and white supremacist violence in this country, we who have able-bodied hands and voices and the ability to show up right now and push, then we can and must live in Chaddi Kala, labor in joy, in ever-rising energy, in ever-rising high spirits. And whenever my energy falters, I look to my Sikh sisters, and I ask you to look to them too. Because we don't go to battle alone, we don't give birth alone, we need each other. So let them be your midwives. Let them be your maipagos, leading you back into the battle when you falter. And if we are breathing and then pushing together, then just maybe, Joe's baby and Sathjit's baby and my babies, maybe we can give them a world that is safer for them than it was for us. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Wow. Valerie, every time we get to hear you speak, it is so inspiring. Thank you for continuously showing us a better way forward. We are so grateful to you and everyone who participated in tonight's Power Summit. Greetings, I'm Whitney Murray Brown, and I have the incredible privilege of serving as the campaign director for Faith in Public Life's Women of Faith program. As you've witnessed tonight, our goal is to amplify the voices of women across all backgrounds and faith traditions as we reshape the narrative of what it means to be a faithful woman voter. To that end, with the help of our advisory council, we have developed Women of Faith 2020, a bold, unapologetic, and uncompromising call to morality, equity, and justice for every woman everywhere. You can read it and sign our platform and learn more about the program at www.faithinpubliclife.org/women of faith. Be sure to tune in next week for our third Power Summit, Never Again. Social justice, activism, and using your voice to speak truth to power. We can't wait to share with you the incredible activism and faith of Jewish women across the United States. We hope you will join our movement, because when women lead, change follows. And now, go forth into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor and serve all persons. Love, rejoicing in the power of the Almighty. And let grace and love be with you all. Thank you.